Hi, everyone. I'm Todd Davidson, the CEO of Travel Oregon. Thank you for taking the time to join us for our State of the Industry webinar today. As we begin, it's important to take a moment to acknowledge the more than 60 tribes and bands of indigenous peoples that have lived in the Northwest region since time immemorial. I'm grateful for the land itself, for those who have stewarded it for generations, and for the opportunity to study, to learn, to work, and to be in community with each and every one of you on this land. One feature that we're utilizing during today's meeting is the use of closed captioning. We feel this is an important step in supporting both the state's and Travel Oregon's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Should you prefer, you can turn off this feature by using the button located on your Zoom navigation bar. You know, it's hard to believe that the first case of COVID-19 was reported in Oregon more than a year ago. The pandemic turned the world upside down, and 2020 was a year of significant loss and great challenges. In many ways, though, it was also a transformative year, a year of evaluating, learning, and growing. At the start of the 2019-2021 biennium, Travel Oregon adopted its first ever equity statement and a vision of a better life for all Oregonians through strong, sustainable local communities that welcome a diversity of explorers. Like so many, with the long overdue momentum of the movement against racial injustice, we recognize room for needed improvements. Travel Oregon is committed to making sure that we do everything within our power to move forward in positioning Oregon as an equitable destination. Together, we can weather global pandemics, historic wildfires, and ice storms, but it's all for nothing if those who live in and visit our state don't feel welcome. As we launch the development of a 4-year strategic plan to guide us through rebuilding Oregon's economy, we will do so with racial equity at the forefront of our decisions that guide our work. We've heard from our industry partners and have witnessed firsthand how the tourism industry has experienced the most severe impacts from the pandemic. The recent national jobs report found that nearly 4 in 10 jobs lost nationwide are in the leisure and hospitality sector, as the travel industry suffered a $500 billion loss in visitor spending. The Dean Runyon Associates Oregon Travel Impacts Report, released in February, shows visitors spent $5.4 billion in 2020, a 58% decline from 2019. The jobs in the industry were at 89,000, a 24% drop, and that state and local tax revenues were at $350 million, a 43% decrease. As we turn the page to 2021, with its promise of a vaccine and hope for recovery, we also acknowledge that this year will continue to bring challenges to the industry. However, with an improved economic outlook and a revised budget forecast, we redirected more than $4 million in revenues through a budget modification at last week's Tourism Commission meeting to fuel a suite of investments we are releasing this spring to support our partners across Oregon. Today, I'm joined by members of the Travel Oregon team, Scott Bricker, Kevin Wright, and Teresa O'Neill, who will share more about these investments, and Nastasia Olson to speak to the agency's strategic planning process. And to provide the global context for our strategies, though, I will first introduce Adam Sachs, the president of Tourism Economics, to be able to give us that 30,000-foot view of the forecast for domestic and international travel as we continue to incrementally emerge from the results of the pandemic. Adam, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, greetings. It's very good to be with you, even virtually today. The remarks I'm going to share with you today are under the banner of planning for the recovery. And where we sit, that recovery is indeed nearer than ever. And there are real opportunities as we position our destinations, our businesses, to take full advantage of that recovery. So I'm going to go ahead and share some slides with you that will be a bit of a guide for us as we go through the content. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing, of course, we just need to recognize is that we are right now in truly a difficult spot. I mean, The situation is dismal by any measure, but I think we do at the same time need to recognize that the situation is improving, and it's improving rather dramatically over the last 6-8 weeks in terms of the number of deaths from COVID-19, as well as hospitalizations on a daily basis. And so these are indeed encouraging signs before us, but I think it can be helpful, particularly when we are in historic times, to try to gain some historic perspective. And so it takes me to the thoughts of a guy that lived 500 years ago. His name was Thomas Fuller. Now, you may not know who Thomas Fuller is. I didn't know until fairly recently. Thomas Fuller is responsible for one of the most irritating quotes that has ever adorned a poster that I'm sure that you've seen. And the quote is this: "It is said that the darkest hour of the night comes just before the dawn." Now, first of all, I don't even know if this is meteorologically true that it's darkest just before the dawn. But why is it potentially relevant? Well, a couple of reasons. The first is that Thomas Fuller, when he penned this, it was part of a travelogue of the Holy Land. So he was in fact part of the travel industry when he wrote this originally. The second point of relevance is perhaps an ironic twist of fate, is that Thomas Fuller died at the age of 53 of an epidemic infectious disease. So perhaps there is a connection here, but the main connection, even though this is not a helpful quote, is that right now it's likely true. And while these are still, in many senses of the word, dark times, the dawn is indeed getting closer. And we can really see that in terms of the trajectory of vaccinations. And really, we are on track for a vaccination level of between 40 and 60% of the population by the end of June. And so that really does set the stage for an entirely different summer than what we experienced in 2020. Now, right now, things are still really tough, whether we look at hotel room demand, which is down about a third, or air passenger demand in the US, which is down nearly 2/3. We see very challenging situation, but you do see a bit of a glimmer there in terms of auto trips, down only 7% in the latest data. So people are traveling, they're just getting there perhaps a little bit differently. Now, right now, travel confidence remains pretty low. This is Longwood's, their every other week survey that we track, and it's showing that still less than 50% of the traveling public say they feel safe traveling outside their community. So what I want to try to do is give you a perspective on why we think, even though travel confidence is rather low at the moment, that we are setting the stage for a significant recovery in travel demand. Now, the first reason for that is indeed the economy. And you might expect that I would refer to the economy, given that I represent a company called Tourism Economics. But let me give you some substance to why we think the economy is going to drive a recovery in travel. Now, the most important indicator that I think that you should be tracking is what's going on in the jobs market. The US economy lost 22 million jobs in the spring of last year. But what we see is a significant recovery over the ensuing months, recovering about half the jobs lost, but plateauing at the moment. And so we are down about 10 million jobs from where we were a year ago. Now, where does that leave us as far as the unemployment rate? Well, it's 6.3%, which puts us a bit lower than the average of recessions over the last 60 years, which is that gray band that you're seeing. So is 6.3% bad? How is that going to affect things? Well, let me put a bit of a sharper point on it for you. When we see that the labor force participation rate is at the lowest that it's been since the 1970s, what we realize is that people have left the labor force, be it because they're discouraged, they feel it's unsafe, perhaps they have family commitments that make them unable to work. All of those things combined have actually reduced the number of people in the official labor force. If we had held the labor force constant over this past year, the unemployment rate would actually be over 11%. So indeed, the labor market situation is even worse than we might see at first blush. So that said, why do we think that the economy is still going to support a recovery? I'm going to list a number of reasons for you, and I'm going to just run through them and give you evidence of why we think it's a positive on each point. The first is that we fully expect the labor market to strengthen in the spring and summer. Why is that? Well, it's because so many of the jobs have been lost in the leisure and hospitality industry, and that industry we do expect to pick up in the summer months. And so what we see is a labor market recovery that's very different from what we saw in the aftermath of the great financial crisis, which is what that blue line is. And so that red line that you're seeing, that is the Oxford Economics forecast for employment growth. And you can see we expect to get fully back to the levels we were in by, well, the summer of 2022, which is a pretty fast pickup given the number of jobs that were lost last spring. So there's the first reason, expected pickup in the labor market. The second reason is interest rates. So the Federal Reserve has interest rates near zero right now. That has a number of positive effects for the US economy. One of them, of course, is it's reducing the cost of debt for households, so freeing up income for spending. It reduces the cost of debt for companies, freeing up money for investment. And of course, it's been absolutely a boon for the real estate market with mortgage rates at near record lows, which is why home sales and the construction of new homes have been taking off and continue to run at a very, very fast clip. So interest rates very much wind in the sails of the US economy. Next is fiscal stimulus. The federal government has already spent $4 trillion. And you may have seen that another 1.9 trillion was just approved by Congress. That's going to top us over $5 trillion that will have been spent in fiscal stimulus to combat the downturn of this crisis. If you want a historic comparison to that, we can go back a decade. What was invested as stimulus in the wake of the great financial crisis? Well, those blue steps, you can see they top out at $2 trillion. So here we are at well more than double of what was spent. And this is a massive catalyst for economic activity at every level. And I would add that it actually represents upside to the economic outlook. As this stimulus flows through the US economy, it actually could drive GDP growth even above what Oxford Economics is forecasting. Whenever we do our forecast, we look at what are the risks? Could it turn out better or worse? And what are the potential ways that could skew? Right now, we actually see the risks to our forecast skewing to the upside for the US economy, with potentially another 0.7% of GDP in the offing as a result of the effect of this stimulus. So that leads us to this question of, well, when will travel recover? And I'm going to try to piece together a number of cross sections of data that I hope begin to answer the question. But I think just to start, I want to set out our main assumptions to the forecast. The first is that there's no getting around that the first quarter is going to continue to be difficult. I shared with you some of the recent data for the first part of the year. I expect that to be pretty much the state of play through March. But if you can look forward beyond March to April, May, June, the second quarter, and then beyond that into this full summer months, that's when we expect vaccination programs to make a truly meaningful impact. And it sets the stage for a leisure travel recovery that we believe there's significant pent-up demand for. And it really is the combination of the vaccine, the warmer weather, infection-based immunity, all of these things combined to really minimize the effect of COVID-19 on travel. Now, we will still be living with COVID-19, but it won't have the same devastating impact on our industry that we experienced last summer. Now that moves us forward in our recovery timeline to the fourth quarter, think the fall into the winter months, when the context for business and group travel begins to normalize. Now it's going to be slower to recover, and I'll share with you some of our forecasts, but that's when we start to see traction in those markets, with the group and corporate side still being 20 to 30% below prior peaks. Now, one of the reasons that I'm especially bullish about the leisure market is that higher income households have been relatively unaffected by this downturn. In fact, the unemployment rate for people with a bachelor's degree or higher is only 4.2%. Compare that to a high school diploma household where the unemployment rate is double that. Well, that matters. It matters because households earning more than $100,000 represent some 59% of all travel spending on leisure in the US. Now, they may represent only 24% of households, but nearly 60% of households of traveler spending. So the households that make up the greatest part of the travel industry have been relatively unaffected and therefore are ready, willing, and able to spend as soon as things open up. And if I can emphasize that even more, I'll do it by sharing with you how much these households have saved over the past year. $1.6 trillion and counting that have been saved by higher income households. And this is money that is really lying in wait as the travel economy opens up and these households begin to travel. Now, right now they're traveling differently, and I think we can expect this to be really part of what we should expect to see over the remaining next, say, the next 6 months, as this survey is indicating. 31% say they're choosing destinations they can drive to as opposed to flying. 30% say they're reducing the number of trips. 25% say they're traveling within the US instead of internationally. And then you can see 15% say they're choosing rural destinations over city destinations. And only 15% say they're canceling trips, which is actually about balanced out the 16% that say that they're not changing their travel plans at all due to COVID-19. So what is our forecast? Well, I'm going to share with you our national forecast that we do with the U.S. Travel Association, and we update this throughout the year. The main point I want to leave with you here is that the domestic market is going to come back pretty quickly. We expect it to reach 82% of prior levels this year, and then just about match 2019 levels in 2022 at 98% of those levels of trips. Now, international inbound is going to take longer, right? This year, continue to be really tough, down some 58% we expect relative to 2019, with a full recovery not until about 2024 on the international side. Now, similarly, we see a disparity between what's happening in business and leisure. Leisure travel, volumes of trips, we expect to get back to where it was in 2022, but even in 2021, pretty close to where it was, 90% of where it was on the leisure side in 2021. Now, business is an entirely different story. It takes until about 2024 to get back to the level of business travel that we had in 2019. But I do want to encourage you to think about this year, 2021, in a sense as a year of two halves, where the first half, we're going to continue to be under the strain of the effects of COVID-19. But the second half is where we really begin the accelerated recovery that we expect. And you can see it in our forecast for room demand that we publish with STR on a quarterly basis, where the first 2 quarters of 2021 averaged to room demand down about 35%. But if you move to the second 2 quarters, Q3, Q4 of 2021, well, that room demand downturn is only about 15% below 2019 levels. That's a totally different environment than the one that we've been in over the past year. And we have historic precedent for these sorts of recoveries. In the aftermath of SARS, Hong Kong and Singapore both fully recovered their levels of international travel within 14 to 17 months of the crisis itself being essentially resolved. And a recent survey by the International Air Transport Association bears this out even now, where they say 80% of respondents say they will go back to travel as usual within 6 months of resolution of the crisis. It speaks to the incredible resilience of the traveler, even in the aftermath of very, very difficult and dark crises. And in fact, we're seeing it already. This is the latest wave from Longwoods International. And it's really astounding that now 81% of households say that they have travel plans in the next 6 months. In fact, we have to go back to pre-crisis dates to get to the point where we have anything as high as we're experiencing right now. And it's been borne out in the last 2 waves of the survey. And so people are planning to travel. They may not feel comfortable right now, but they expect to feel comfortable, and they're making plans and getting ready, especially for this summer. So let me end with just a few final thoughts. The first is, how do we advocate for our industry during this crisis? I think many of us have been more involved in advocacy over the past year than ever before, because our industry has never been in the sort of devastating crisis that we've been in over the past year. I'm going to share with you a few metrics that I think are especially helpful in that advocacy process. The first is a reminder that the leisure and hospitality industry has been a leader of Oregon job growth over the past decade. In fact, leisure and hospitality employment grew 32% from 2010 to 2019. The total Oregon economy only produced an increase of 21%. Now, both bested the US job market at just 16% growth. But clearly what we see is that the leisure and hospitality industry, where the travel industry resides, has been a driver of job growth over this past decade. So surely for Oregon to begin to grow again, we must restore this sector. Now, let me put this in even sharper relief. No other industry has been hit as hard as travel. The leisure and hospitality industry through February has now lost 37% of all employment relative to a year ago. And there's no sector that even comes close in Oregon to having been hit as hard as leisure and hospitality. So if there's going to be any support given, it should be in the industry hardest hit. And let me put this into even, put more emphasis on it by sharing with you this statistic that more than half of all the jobs lost in Oregon have been in the leisure and hospitality industry. So it leads us to this very clear conclusion that the only way that the Oregon economy gets back on its feet is by the travel industry in Oregon getting back on its feet. Simply put, too much of the losses have been concentrated in the travel industry for the economy to get back to recovery any other way. And so whether it be for destination marketing funding, for safe reopening plans, for supporting small businesses, whatever the avenue is, it's absolutely vital that policymakers support the travel industry and its much, much needed recovery. But we are optimistic. All indicators do point to a strong leisure travel rebound, and the labor market is going to follow that. So we do expect there to be job growth in the summer months. And when I look at Oregon specifically, your exposure to the domestic market is really encouraging. You also have a very high component of travelers who are coming for leisure, right? And so the two segments, leisure and domestic travel, that will be leading this recovery really do favor Oregon's travel industry. And then thirdly, even when I look at the international market mix, because Oregon is so exposed to the Canadian and Chinese travel market, that's actually a good thing, because those are two of the markets that we expect to recover first in the case of Canada, and then in the medium and long term to grow the fastest in the case of China. So let me end with just a final thought. I'm actually sharing these remarks with you from, of all places, a hotel room. And so for me personally, travel has begun, and my travel calendar, every time a new trip gets added, and this is happening on a more frequent basis, a part of me comes to life. And there have been a lot of naysayers that have said that travel will not fully recover, whether it be business travel or leisure travel. People will travel differently, talk of a new normal. Well, let me just say that we've seen these predictions before of the demise of travel, and none of them have ever aged well. Travel has always fully recovered, and the resilience has been proven time and time again. But it has led me to ask this question of myself: will there be an enduring legacy of this crisis? In some way, will we be different? And it's not a reluctance to travel that will be the enduring legacy of this crisis. In fact, I'm convinced that the enduring legacy of this crisis will actually be gratitude. That on the other side of this, if you can imagine with me, when we are able to travel freely, unhindered by fear or restrictions, how will we feel about travel in a way that's different from the way we felt about it in 2019? Won't we appreciate it in a totally different, new, increased way? When we're able to meet together, when you are all together in person, won't you be more grateful for it than ever before? And I think that's going to be the enduring legacy, that for years to come, we will look back at the year when travel was taken away from us and will say, that was terrible. I am so thankful that we can travel again. So thank you very much for having me with you today. It is a pleasure. And I look forward to the next chance that we can have to be together. Thank you.
Well put, Adam. If there is a lasting legacy, gratitude may indeed be that word. Gratitude for one another, gratitude for our friends and our relatives, gratitude for the ability to exercise that freedom to travel. Which is encouraging to hear the domestic and international forecasts. In Oregon, we're anticipating the transoceanic flights will begin serving PDX as markets begin to reopen. Travel restrictions lift in key European and Asian markets, and the vaccines are more widely distributed. We look forward to these international flights, including Delta's Amsterdam and Tokyo Haneda flights to PDX, as well as Condor's flight from Frankfurt and others, which are tentatively scheduled to begin perhaps as early as later this spring. Before we delve into the details around our recovery suite of investments, I'll provide an update on Travel Oregon's biennial budget modification that I referenced earlier and our upcoming biennial revenue forecast. Last week at the Oregon Tourism Commission meeting, we reviewed a variety of data points that were provided by Tourism Economics and our research team at Travel Oregon. This provided us with an overview of Travel Oregon's revenue forecast and how the state's tourism economy is forecasted to perform over the next biennium. We are seeing signs of recovery, and Oregon is faring well, in fact, slightly better than the US. As you can see on this graph, Oregon is the orange line, the US is the light blue, Idaho's the dark blue, and New York is shown in red. Idaho and New York provide examples of states that are generating stronger room revenue and less strong room revenue, respectively. States that have more leisure travel, especially in outdoor recreation or beach opportunities, have performed better than other states, as consumers are looking for those open spaces. This helps explain Oregon's success in the early recovery. States that are more highly dependent on business travel or conventions like New York have been more negatively impacted. Now, we asked Tourism Economics to develop 3 scenarios reflecting their best thinking of what could be happening in the future. They considered what is happening with the virus, both from a containment and a vaccine distribution standpoint, and assumptions of how the economy is performing at a macro level due to these factors. The baseline is considered the most probable outcome at this time. The upside scenario is based on vaccine distribution progress and the economy doing better than what we expected. The downside, obviously, is the reverse of that. Now, as we consider these scenarios and their drivers, we need to consider the factors that will be driving Oregon's tourism recovery. This slide shows the key factors that are driving Oregon's forecast. Oregon has a favorable market mix with high leisure, drive, and domestic shares that have impacted Oregon's performance in the travel sector. And we have the natural attractions that are great for physical distancing. Tourism Economics also believes that the West Coast will recover more quickly. While economically it seems bad now, it is predicted to recover pretty quickly and is expected to perform better in the medium and longer term. Taking the scenario drivers and these factors into account, Tourism Economics suggested 3 scenarios in our revenue forecast. Here, those 3 scenarios are shown graphically. One thing to note is how the forecast shows that the upside is closer to the baseline than the downside. This is because in the current environment that we're planning within, there is more downside risk as there are more unknown variables that could negatively impact the forecast. That's why you see the larger gap between the baseline and the downside. These budget scenarios do take into account the 0.3% decrease in the state transient lodging tax that went into effect on July 1 of 2020. Overall, FY21 is forecasted to receive about 50% of the FY19 revenue, and subsequently recovering to about 70% of the FY 2019 revenue in FY 22 and about 80% then in FY 23. As a result, Tourism Economics is projecting that in FY 22 and 23, we will reach $29.1 million and $32.5 million in statewide transient lodging tax revenue, respectively. The big difference between this forecast and Tourism Economics' previous forecast is what occurs this year, FY 2021. Tourism Economics made their first FY 21 forecast in June of last year as the second wave of the pandemic was cresting, and Tourism Economics assumed that would indeed hamper summer travel. However, the wave crested faster than expected, and as cases went back down, Oregon had a stronger summer season than was forecasted. The increase in FY21 was due to the outperformance in the summer months primarily. Looking to the future, Oregon's domestic market mix is encouraging. Our high shares of leisure, drive, and transient visitors will boost Oregon's recovery. Also, our international market mix is encouraging. Canada and China are forecasted to rebound faster than most other international markets, though they will be slower than the domestic market recovery. We are seeing the economic climate improving with vaccinations starting to pick up and room revenue generally increasing as a result. So we've analyzed these revenue forecasts, and at last Tuesday's Tourism Commission meeting, the Tourism Commission adopted these estimates as a forecast for us to use for planning the next biennium's programs. As a result of the revised FY21 forecast, the Oregon Tourism Commission adopted a modified budget at their February public meeting, increasing the fiscal budget from $16 million in statewide transient lodging tax to $20 million. This allows these resources to be directly allocated to a host of programs designed to support small businesses and organizations across the state, all with an eye on economic recovery and resiliency. The overall budget modification translates into $4.6 million in direct investments that provide real and immediate relief in the following ways. $1.2 million encumbered for future RCTP, the Regional Cooperative Tourism Program, and grants. $200,000 for additional destination-ready projects. $650,000 for destination-ready projects that are orchestrated collaboratively with our competitive grant program team. $1.5 million to the Regional Recovery and Stability Program through our regional destination management organizations, and an additional $1 million to our grants programs. We're thrilled with the Commission's action to directly program these dollars and get them out to our industry partners in a recovery suite of investments that totals nearly $6 million across destination ready, marketing, regional marketing and management, and grant programs. And with that, I'll hand it over to Scott Bricker, Travel Oregon's Interim Vice President of Destination Development, Kevin Wright, our Vice President of Global Marketing, and Teresa O'Neill, our Vice President of Global Strategic Partnerships, to share more on Travel Oregon's recovery suite of investments designed to bolster the rebuilding of Oregon's tourism economy.
Thank you, Todd, for the opportunity. Travel Oregon heard very clearly from tourism industry that two strategies would most effectively support them in responding to COVID-19 and other challenges that the state is facing. These strategies are financial investments in tourism businesses and industry partners. You will hear more about these by our Global Strategic Partnerships team, and the development, enhancement, and stewardship of COVID-19 appropriate visitor experiences around the state, which is what I will focus on here. In response, Travel Oregon and the Destination Development Department launched the Destination Ready program. We designed this program to provide direct funding and technical assistance in support of development, enhancement, and stewardship of COVID-19 appropriate visitor experiences. Communities were invited to apply for a combination of funding and technical assistance between $10,000 and $50,000. Applications stress the importance of enhancing tourism assets to create safe, engaging, sustainable, and economically impactful experiences. Ultimately, this program aims to bolster community assets that both visitors and locals can enjoy, while also creating market-ready experiences that can be promoted with confidence when typical travel promotion and marketing resumes. To ensure Travel Oregon's ability to support projects, we narrowed the destination-ready eligibility criteria to the project areas you see on the screen. We chose these areas as they are aligned with Travel Oregon's understanding of our state's key tourism drivers. Shore up areas that either experienced high use over the past year or that need help to ensure local livability and business viability. Areas that the Destination Development team has been working on in communities across Oregon for over a decade, and projects that will make tangible on-the-ground and expedited timeline, on-the-ground impact on an expedited timeline. All projects must be completed by September 30 with the goal of completing them sooner for the peak visitor season. Within barely 3 weeks, just shy of $4 million in asks came in. There were 135 applications from all 7 tourism regions and across all project categories. The program was originally slated to distribute $250,000 in funding and technical assistance, but based on the massive need, Travel Oregon responded with and able to find 34 projects totaling $913,000. An interesting point is that no match is required for these projects. That said, even during these challenging times, partners offered substantial match, and the 34 selected projects include over $1.3 million in cash and in-kind match. Here you can see a quick snapshot of how the project awards were distributed. We were able to offer awards in each tourism region and across all categories, with outdoor recreation development and stewardship programs leading the pack, and Main Streets and Town Center projects aimed at bolstering businesses next. And just to give you a sense of the diversity of projects that we funded, I've listed 7 of the 34 projects here, and I want to touch on just a few of them verbally. The Eastern Oregon Visitors Association is collaborating with a diversity of trails associations and U.S. Forest Service units to support stewarding popular outdoor assets. In the Wallowa National Forest, the Wallowa Mountains Hells Canyon Trails Association will run volunteer work parties to clear and maintain hiking trails to expand access and mitigate resource impacts. To the south, the Anthony Lakes Mountain Resort will lead clearing and stewardship of the Elkhorn Crest Trail and other key trails in the area to disperse users. In the Waihe region, activities will consist of trash cleanups at popular trailheads, day use areas, and campgrounds. And in the Steens Mountain Wilderness and Alver Desert, volunteers will collect data on visitation, condition of signage, trails, infrastructure, and campgrounds. Volunteers will also disperse fire rings, pick up trash, and maintain trails. Cascade volunteers will lead the Mackenzie Regenerative Travel Project in partnership with Travel Lane County, the Willamette Valley Visitors Association, Willamette National Forest, and First Nature Tours to execute 4 stewardship-focused travel weekends. During each weekend, visitors will help restore diverse recreation sites and stay, eat, and shop locally, contributing to the economic viability of Mackenzie's gateway communities. In the Dalles Main Street program built 6 parklets in 2020 with the funding of the city's COVID relief program. The Destination Ready project will build on this popular effort by adding another 6 parklets in front of more businesses, supporting additional commercial recovery. And in the Rogue Valley Vintners will work with Travel Oregon to conduct a digital footprint audit of participating wineries. The audit will make recommendations and implement strategies to enhance the effectiveness of their digital presence and inform guests about COVID-19 protocols in a way that does not detract from the experience. These are just a sample of the exciting projects the Destination Ready program will advance. At the completion of these projects, Travel Oregon will be conducting an evaluation of each one to help guide our future work approach, investment strategy, and share learnings with the tourism industry. We expect these evaluations to be complete before the end of the year, so keep an eye on our industry newsletter. I would like to say a huge thank you to the entire Travel Oregon team that helped make this expedited program a reality, and encourage communities and businesses to continue your innovative and groundbreaking work. Now, I would like to pass the reins over to Kevin Wright, Vice President of our amazing Global Marketing Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Wright, Vice President of Global Marketing at Travel Oregon. Today, I'm going to share Travel Oregon's marketing strategy and opportunities for businesses and destination management organizations to leverage this work to support the recovery of Oregon's tourism industry. To understand where we're going, it helps to talk about where we've been. Throughout COVID, we've all used the word pivot almost as much as we've said you're muted. Last March, the pandemic hit Oregon right as we were getting ready to launch our only slightly exaggerated advertising campaign. As the industry shut down, we paused the campaign and began supporting the governor's office with our agency, Wieden & Kennedy, to develop safety messages to mitigate the spread of COVID. In May, we created a recovery campaign called Welcome to Oregon Again. But as COVID cases spiked, we were asked to hold off on tourism promotion. In lieu of our traditional travel inspiration campaigns, we focused our owned, earned, and paid channels on the communication of 3 core messages under the umbrella of our Take Care Out There stewardship messaging platform. These core messages are public safety, business resiliency, and the stewardship of public lands. In a year that had already been difficult, September brought catastrophic wildfires and a need to repurpose all of our communication channels and content to address the devastating fires, including travel alerts, how to help, and the many stories of resiliency. In November, we developed a campaign in partnership with the Governor's Office, Business Oregon, and Built Oregon called Give the Gift of Oregon to directly support local businesses through the holiday season and beyond. As COVID cases decrease and consumer confidence toward travel planning continues to rise, Oregon is well positioned to capitalize on pent-up demand for travel. To get in front of that demand, the marketing team is building a phased advertising approach that affords maximum flexibility. It begins with marketing in-state to Oregonians and then expands our reach to our traditional markets in California, Washington, Idaho, and eventually Canada. Phase 1 of our advertising will leverage the campaign we built last May called Welcome to Oregon Again. The ads give Oregonians permission to travel again, exploring all our home state has to offer. We are planning to be ready to launch this work in early May. While some may be hesitant to travel, the call to action will position Travel Oregon as a trusted resource to find safe travel planning. Hi, buddy. Phase 2 will see the launch of a new Oregon Slightly Exaggerated film. The childlike innocence, playfulness, and joy this creative was designed to evoke will be a welcome message to stressed out humans in Oregon and beyond, positioning Oregon as that magical destination for your next vacation. While our crystal ball for the timing of marketing out of state is a little murkier, we are planning to be ready with this campaign in August. To leverage this work, we'll be working with the regional destination management organizations to create the largest online travel agency campaign Travel Oregon has ever built to support lower funnel conversions through traffic to partner sites and direct bookings. As I mentioned, these campaigns are being built to be flexible, and the target dates I'm sharing may change based on COVID numbers. For each campaign, we will share paid media plans and all creative assets on our industry site as far in advance as possible. Please take a moment to review these toolkits as they're published and make sure to leverage the work and align your efforts wherever possible. As many Oregon businesses, destination management organizations, and our competition begins to market again, alignment to increase share of voice and ultimately share of travelers' hearts has never been more important. If you're not already receiving them, please sign up for our industry e-newsletters to get updates as we head into spring. We'll be working closely with the Governor's Office on appropriate timing, and we'll provide important updates on these programs via that resource. Let me move it to the next slide. While Travel Oregon's advertising drives inspiration and demand for travel, we've also been thinking further down the funnel. We have a new opportunity kicking off next week that will help Oregon businesses manage their Google My Business listings, giving Oregon a competitive advantage as we rebuild our tourism industry. Research shows that over 90% of internet searches happen in Google, and businesses with up-to-date Google listings are 70% more likely to attract visits and 50% more likely to drive purchase. Ensuring your business appears in search results with an up-to-date Google listing has never been more important than it is today as business evolve their operations to meet changing regulations and consumer needs. To make sure Oregon tourism businesses have an advantage when we begin marketing again, we partner with Local, a Portland-based company, to provide a platform that makes it easier for businesses to manage their listings and optimize their Google My Business profiles. The platform enables businesses to create events and deals, engage with customer reviews, manage photos, and monitor business performance. The platform also provides one-on-one customer support, which is a level of service Google doesn't offer. The goal of this opportunity is to support tourism recovery in Oregon by helping businesses take advantage of free tools to make them stand out in Google results. Plus, it will streamline listings management for Travel Oregon and destination management organizations using Otis, the Oregon Tourism Information System. Updates that businesses make in the platform will simultaneously update their Google listing, their listing on TravelOregon.com, as well as 12 other websites across the state that currently subscribe to Otis data. Travel Oregon will also benefit from this platform by getting insight into analytics at a statewide and regional level, such as conversions from search, revenue projections, and website visits by region. We'll be launching this opportunity with an information session on March 11th from noon to 1, and we invite you to join us to learn more about how you can take advantage of this free opportunity. You can see the website on the slide. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Teresa O'Neill, Travel Oregon's Vice President of Global Strategic Partnerships, to talk about Travel Oregon's grant program.
Thanks, Kevin. As Scott mentioned earlier in the presentation, the need for grant funding was stated loud and clear in our stakeholder survey, and I'm happy to be with you all this afternoon to provide you with an update on both our grant program and our Oregon Wine Country License Plates Matching Grants program. Travel Oregon takes great pride in being a steward of state dollars. In June 2020, Travel Oregon awarded over $800,000 to 121 organizations. It's through our competitive grants program that we are able to get a firsthand glimpse into the impact that some of these investments have made on organizations and businesses. First, I want to thank those previous awardees for sharing with us how these dollars have been able to make a difference for you, whether in helping to sustain your business operations or providing an avenue to create or promote a new tourism asset. Travel Oregon is proud of your accomplishments and humbled by the work that you're doing. On the screen, you can read a quote from one of the COVID-19 Emergency Response Grant Program awardees, who shared how the funds were used to support maintaining our fellow Oregonians' jobs. The work you're doing is making a difference, and we look forward to continuing to support the industry through our competitive grants program. I'm very excited to unveil Travel Oregon's upcoming round of funding for the competitive grants program. Guidelines are currently available on Travel Oregon's industry website, and applications will be accepted from March 15th through the 30th for the grants program. Building on the momentum of the Destination Ready program that Scott spoke to earlier, and the knowledge that visitors are traveling throughout our state, the grants are set to be awarded prior to the peak visitor season. Travel Oregon has committed $2.3 million of funding to this program, as these investments will have the ability to help economic recovery efforts by enhancing and expanding the visitor experience over both the short and long term. These investments will help expand infrastructure to provide relief for high-use outdoor spaces, enhance downtown districts with areas for seating or socially distanced gatherings, and will offset costs created by a need for COVID-friendly operations encountered by ticketed events, attractions, and Oregon's tour operators, guides, and outfitters. Travel Oregon looks forward to receiving your applications and will announce those awarded funding on April 30th. Eligible applicants include government, port districts, federally recognized tribes, nonprofit associations registered with the Oregon Secretary of State's office, Oregon-based tour operators, guides, and outfitters. Travel Oregon also administers the Oregon Wine Country License Plates Matching Grants program. For those in the wine industry, you're probably now familiar with the Oregon Wine Board's new Oregon Wine brand. That project was supported through a $50,000 Oregon Wine Country License Plate Matching Grant. The annual funding program will open for applications in May. Grant guidelines will be published in early April on Travel Oregon's industry website. Funded through the portion of the sale or renewal fees for the Oregon Wine Country License Plate, there's currently $400,000 available for request in the upcoming grant cycle. Please reference our industry website at industrytraveloregon.com/recovery grants and sign up for industry newsletters to receive notification of when these opportunities open. We're excited to support our partners through these grant opportunities. And now I'll hand it back to Todd.
Thanks, Teresa. And thank you, Kevin and Scott, for those great updates. You know, the updates on the Destination Ready program, Travel Oregon's marketing direction, and the upcoming grant opportunities as shared by Scott and Kevin and Teresa, all noted, are real-time opportunities for you to be able to leverage, and more information on those programs can be found on Travel Oregon's industry website. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, Travel Oregon has begun early work on the development of a 4-year strategic plan that will go into effect at the start of this next fiscal year on July 1. To provide more on this process, please welcome Nastasia Olson. Staj?
Thank you, Todd. Hello, everyone. As Todd said, I'm Nastasia Olson, and as we launch into the process to develop our 4-year strategic plan that will guide us through rebuilding Oregon's economy, I'm pleased to share a bit about the approach, the rationale, the timeline, and some immediate opportunities for engagement coming up here shortly. So as Todd spoke to earlier, while we begin to see the dire impacts of COVID-19 on the tourism industry, we also continue to operate in a highly fluid and uncertain economic climate, having to look at a multitude of scenarios. So to be responsive and intentional in this environment as we begin strategic planning in this two-phased approach, we will be strategic planning in a two-phased approach to be intentional in this environment. And so what this means is we will be launching a short-term rebuild plan that this spring, serving as a catalyst from COVID crisis to an emphasis on short-term rebuilding, really focusing on repair and investing in key opportunities to restore, as you've heard in these previous presentations. We can pull back up the presentation if you'd like to. But as we shift from these crisis strategies that we've been into these rebuild strategies, we must also continue to recognize the magnitude of the tourism industry, what we've experienced these past 12 months. Born out of these challenges really is the opportunity for growth, and I think the responsibility to re-examine the role of tourism in the future of Oregon's economy. We're seeing visitors shift their behaviors, some of which may become permanent. We're also seeing the impacts of climate change with more extreme weather patterns and longer and more intense wildfire seasons. And we have the long overdue need to put conversations and policies against racial injustice in the forefront of all of our decisions. So all of this is paramount, that while we rebuild, we must also rethink. And so while rethinking the future may sound daunting from where we've all been the last year, it's really also an exciting opportunity for regrowth and transformation, making our industry even more resilient and more relevant. Taking this two-phase approach will allow us a chance to set a longer range vision, allowing us to take our rebuild plan into a really transformational plan and extending that until the year 2025. And this will allow us more time for robust industry engagement with all of you and ensuring that our work is integrated through an equity lens. So here on this next slide, which hopefully we will be able to share with you afterwards, is you can see a timeline where we are. Here we go, thanks. Here we are, you can see a timeline of this two-phase planning approach. And so in last October, we launched our industry stakeholder survey. Hopefully all of you were able to take that. We had over 1,200 members complete it, sharing a plethora of information ranging from business and community needs to identifying near and long-term priorities. This survey really serves as a kickoff to our planning efforts, and it is a key underpinning. Building from there, in late 2020, we launched an RFP to find a highly qualified strategic planning firm to guide us in this two-phased planning process. And I'm excited to share that Destination Think has been awarded the contract to carry out this important work with all of us. Combining strategy, data, and creative service communication services, Destination Think is recognized globally as a leader in executing outstanding destination solutions. From here, you will see that we'll be hosting a series of upcoming engagement sessions. Those will be taking place later this month. We will have one in each region. This will lead into a public comment period on the draft of the rebuild plan in late April. And then there will be a public hearing on the draft plan at the May Commission meeting. And then upon the adoption of the rebuild plan at the June Commission meeting, we will then, in earnest, at the June Governor's Conference on Tourism is where we'll really kick off the second phase, developing the longer term transformational plan. And so after June into the fall of this year, there will be continued opportunities for stakeholder engagement, including focus groups, co-creation labs, and an equity assessment. These opportunities in our planning process is not only so important to us, they're highly appreciated and is paramount to ensure your voices are heard and responded to. As you've heard others share today, we will be communicating these events via our industry newsletter. So always stay up to date and please look for those there. And lastly, on this side, as I spoke to, you will see the most immediate opportunities coming up to engage in our planning efforts are taking place March 15th through the 30th. We will be hosting 90-minute virtual sessions in partnership with our regional destination management organizations. There will be a high-level statewide component at the beginning of these meetings, and then really a focused emphasis on the regional strategic plans during the latter part of those meetings. So again, we encourage broad participation at these, so please register today on the industry website, and please share this opportunity with other partners and your constituents. And I hope to see you there. Thank you for the time today, and I will turn it back over to Todd.
All right, Stodge, thank you so very much for that update. And thank you all again for taking the time to join us here today. You know, when Travel Oregon hosted a State of the Industry webinar last April in the early months of the pandemic, we were in the midst of a great deal of fear and uncertainty. We were all reeling from the swift and immediate closures of businesses and attractions that make up the very fabric of the tourism industry in Oregon. Through the pandemic, many of these businesses have permanently closed their door. Nothing is the way that it was. But today, as vaccines continue to be distributed statewide and caseloads decline, I'm encouraged and I'm optimistic that we are finally in a place to begin activating our plans for economic recovery. We know that there's a pent-up demand for travel, and Oregon is well positioned in offering wide open spaces and enriching experiences that travelers from around the world have been dreaming about during the pandemic. From exploring the entirety of Highway 101 along the Oregon coast to experiencing any of the state's scenic byways, the richness and diversity of Oregon's landscapes and warm hospitality are here to welcome them. Oregon is truly a special place. It's not only the scenic beauty, it's not only the incredible bounty that make up our state and make it such an unrivaled destination, but it's the people who call this place home. We're all part of Oregon's tourism industry because we want to share a little bit of our state with the world, whether it's through our products, whether it's through our food, through our places, and through our people. And as part of the tourism industry, it's inherent on us to help ensure that Oregon is a place where all who travel the state, Oregonians and guests alike, enjoy their journey and feel welcome. This is Travel Oregon's North Star. And through our strategic plan and in all we do going forward, we are committed to achieving this outcome. And as we go forward from today, let's take what we've learned from the challenges of 2020 and use it as an opportunity to reimagine tourism in Oregon. I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of you, our tourism partners across the state, as we create an equitable and welcoming destination and work towards economic recovery and resiliency. Thank you again so much for joining us here today. I look forward to moving ahead together with each and every one of you. Thank you.